Well, happy Wednesday morning, everybody, and welcome to the Buckeye Breakdown podcast. It is the middle of the week as the Ohio State Buckeyes get ready for Western Kentucky, a second straight home game on Saturday afternoon. The question is, can the Buckeyes figure out a way, now that they know who their full-blown starting quarterback is and knowing what they're going to be tested by defensively this week, can they go into this game and execute at the highest level? They need the high energy, the high effort, and they need high execution. Those are the words that have been used around the facility at the Woody here this week. We're going to break down what we learned yesterday from Ryan Day and Jim Knowles and what we want to see moving forward here into week 3. Coming up next on Wednesday morning's edition of Buckeye Breakdown.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
Well, morning, everybody, and welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. I'm Brendan Gulick along with Anthony Meglin. Glad to be with you at 7 a.m. every weekday morning on our YouTube channel. You can join us live and participate in the comments section. Occasionally, we'll tape a show and air it live at 7 a.m., but for the most part, we are live every single weekday in an effort to give you, hopefully, your first look every morning at what's going on with the Ohio State Buckeyes. Of course, we're affiliated with the Sports Illustrated Media Group. Buckeye Breakdown podcast. You can support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. That would be awesome. We sure would appreciate that. If you are listening after the fact, I imagine there are some that are, because we post the audio from these shows wherever you like to find your favorite podcasts. There's lots of different ways to be a part of the show, and know that you can follow us on social media and you can support us over on buckeyesnow.com. That would be great. Anthony, we heard from both Ryan Day and Jim Knowles, as we have several Tuesdays in a row and anticipate that we will throughout the course of the season. And I have to be honest, it was a more telling press conference than I anticipated. I'm happy about that. I think there were some things they left unsaid that maybe we need to read between the lines a little on. But the most important thing we know now for sure is that Kyle McCord is the starting quarterback moving forward. Day told both Kyle and Devin Brown that news on Tuesday. He said he had kind of felt like that was the right decision to make even immediately after the game on Saturday, but didn't feel like it was the right time to just come out and say that Kyle had won the job. We've talked for several days now. We thought that was the obvious decision. So asking your immediate reaction on that seems silly, because I think I know what it is.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And first of all, yesterday's press conference was, one of the better ones that we've had from them to this point. It's been pretty consistent that on Tuesday, Coach Day obviously speaks. He'll speak every Tuesday, but we were kind of hoping maybe get Coach Hartline in there instead of Coach Knowles. But I don't know. We'll get into a couple clips from Coach Knowles. And, after we do, I do suggest going back to our page and watching his entire presser, because it's very eye-opening, and he went into a lot of good detail about really what's going on the defensive side. And honestly, if every press conference starts being like today's or yesterday's was, Tuesday's going to become my favorite day of the week, because that was fun to listen to, and I think a lot happened. And in terms of the quarterback position, I love it. I love the fact that there's something decided. I think it would have been a massive mistake if you go into this game still carrying that competition into week 3. I think it was very critical, and I think it was a goal of theirs. Like, hey, by Western Kentucky, you may even said this 2 or 3 weeks ago, by Western Kentucky, we have a guy so that our team can start to grow into match. So that's incredible news. I thought it was great, just great little nuggets here and there, but also some things that I think we could have went a little bit deeper on, or he could have, but I think all in all, it was a pretty telling day yesterday down at the Woody.
And Ryan was asked, hey, why now? And why, if you have been so set on figuring out one versus the other, Kyle versus Devin, when you're playing an opponent that you're favored to beat by almost 4 touchdowns, why make the decision now? And I thought his answer was actually just as important as it was to name Devin the backup to Kyle, in saying that, look, I think it puts Kyle's mind at any ease or peace, right? Like, when you're either fighting for your job or you're not. And in some ways, you're always fighting for your job. But there's something to be said for knowing like, okay, this is the direction that we're going to move forward. And so you can relax a little because everybody stops pressing. But I think Ryan also referenced the fact that as a team, it's kind of good to know like, hey, this is our dude. This is our guy. This is who we're rallying behind. Let's go. And maybe there's not this like schism in the team of one, and I'm not saying that there is, but something could develop where the longer it plays out, where they don't have a decisive answer on quarterback, maybe some guys think one way, some guys think another, and you don't want to create those issues.
Yeah, and it's not a maybe, Brennan. I mean, that's a real thing. And, I talked about this a couple weeks back, I've experienced this before. And, like, this isn't something that, like, when you turn a competition and you start moving it into the season, your focus is in the wrong places as the quarterback, right? I think that when he says peace of mind, as a fan, I wouldn't think that he's going to be like more relaxed. I think it just changes where he's channeling his energy, where it comes from, hey, every day in practice, I'm battling Devin, where now every day in practice, I'm battling Western Kentucky, or next week, I'm battling Notre Dame, or as we go down the road, he can focus on the opponent as opposed to focusing on having the better practice, focus on getting better for Saturday afternoon, because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing and that's what the goal is. But it truly is. I mean, it's a real thing. Like, once that happens and it's decided, there is certainly a level of, just relaxation where it's like, hey, okay, I can now, instead of focusing on beating Devin, or on the flip side, Devin focus on beating Kyle, it's now we're both focusing on our roles for Saturday afternoon. And that's what I'm going to wake up and think about on Monday. It's going to wait what I think about on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and so on. So I think it's such a huge deal and such a huge step that you'll see some improvement, I believe, in Kyle's play.
Well, as a team, everybody needs to be a little bit more consistent. And, in terms of that quarterback battle, I think Day recognized that Kyle has been more consistent and a little more commanding in gameplay itself. And there was just no reason to continue on. But it certainly doesn't mean that Devin's never going to see the field either. It just puts the team at ease to know, okay, we've got our guy, and now let's move forward and see what happens. But the reality is there's a lot that this team needs to focus on. And among the clips we don't have for you in this show, Ryan Day said he is not satisfied with where the offensive line is right now, acknowledged improvement from week 1 to week 2, but was pretty straightforward in saying, look, we got a pretty lofty standard here, and right now we're not hitting it. And it's time to figure out how to get more consistent up front. He didn't call anybody out individually. I think he called out the whole unit saying, figure it out. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that I personally was hoping for maybe a little bit more, and never to call individuals out. Personally, I think that's very low when coaches do that. I disagree with that totally. But I was kind of hoping to hear something about physicality, or hoping to hear something about, hey, how are we going to change this? He kind of was, I don't want to say like standoffish, but just kind of like glossed over it, from a 30,000 foot view of like, hey, this just needs to improve and get better. I was hoping for a little bit more from him, like, hey, this is what we're going to do to kind of improve that, or maybe Luke's getting some reps at first team left tackle this week, or whatever it may be. But he did acknowledge that it's not been good enough. And that there's certain levels that need to be improved. And, it's good to know that offensive line is definitely circled, inside that building as an area of improvement.
So one of the questions I asked him was about how they're going to try to define success this week, because you're playing against a team that you're supposed to beat. It's going to be a much different looking game than the first 2 weeks. You're not facing the triple option. You're not facing an FCS opponent that's way overmatched. You're facing a team that not only doesn't really want to run the ball, they run it just barely enough for you to think like, okay, maybe they'll run it. They basically just try to throw it all over the place. Austin Reed, their redshirt senior quarterback, had statistically had one of the best quarterback seasons in the country last year. But it's offset by the fact that defensively they're not very good, right? So you're kind of hoping this is going to be a banner day offensively, and your defense is going to be tested in a way that they haven't been tested yet. And so I asked Ryan yesterday, how do you define success here this weekend? Here's what he said. Ryan, you were pretty straightforward with us after Indiana when we were talking to you about success. You said, hey, 250 on the ground, 300 through the air, want to score 50 points. Like, that's kind of how you define it. But I'm curious, like in a week like this, aside from that, how do you define success this week? Like, what things are you looking at saying, hey, we're going to, if version 3.0 of us is going to be really good, this, that, whatever it might be, how do you define success this week?
Well, I think the first thing is you want everyone to grade out a champion. You've heard us talk about that. So, we look at effort, we look at execution, we look at different things. And if guys grade over 80%, then they're a champion. I mean, that's a tangible thing you can look at. And, if you have your starters or you have a good portion of your offense or defense, grade out a champion, that's probably a pretty good day. If you don't, then that's not the direction we're trying to go in. So that's the job of the position coaches and the unit coaches and the leader, make sure that their unit is grading out a champion. And we have to be, hard and hold our standard of what is considered a champion and what isn't, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. Now, we'll also look at the game and see, how do we do in third downs? How do we do in red zone? We go through all those situations in the team meeting on Sunday. Did we win those situations? We look at rushing yards. We look at explosive plays. We look at the red zone. We look at third down. We won most of those. We did not win third medium. So that's an area we need to see an improvement in. But those really, if you say tangibly, what are the things? The champions, and then did we win the situations?
What do you think?
I love that. I love that clip because my personal favorite part about it is the situational part. Like, hey, we're going to really study the situationals. And that's just so big. Like, kind of for reference to everyone listening, like every day in practice, Monday they're off, or Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday when it's like actual work days, you script periods for situationals, whether that's red zone day or whether that's third down day or whether that's first and second down day, whatever the case is. That's such a serious emphasis along the way, and it happens really quick. So it's really important, to get good work in during the week, but it's got to come to fruition on Saturdays. And I love hearing him say, like, hey, last week we lost third and medium, and that's a huge deal to us because that is a big deal. Getting in the red area. I can think of 2 times in the red area where they didn't score. Definitely one where you just didn't score. And that can't happen. That can't happen at Ohio State. That can't happen down the street at your high school game on Friday night, but it can't happen in Columbus. So I love the emphasis on situational work and having situational success, along with, hey, the dude's got to grade out well. Because if the guys grade out well, the situational stuff will take care of itself. So let's grade everybody out at the champion level, 80%. That's a high bar to reach. And then from there, let's execute when our backs are against the wall. In the most important parts of the football game, let's be the winners. And I love that answer from him.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things I most appreciate about this coaching staff. There's a lot of pressure on these guys to win all the time. Losing's unacceptable. And there's a lot of different ways to go about how you build a program that wins consistently. And in my opinion, we are at this point well outside the shadow of the Urban Meyer team. This is Ryan Day's program. His fingerprints are all over it, right? And I'm not saying Urban's aren't or Coach Tressel's aren't, but these are Ryan Day's guys. These are the philosophies that, he has to stand up with and the coaches that he's hired and so on and so forth, right? This is not, I inherited a program and I'm going to just continue what was being done. He is well into, this is how I do things. And so there's ownership in that. And I give him and his staff credit for in an atmosphere right now where they are probably going into this season saying, all right, this doesn't feel like going into 2020 when Justin Fields was coming back off of a 2019, loss in a bowl game where you felt jobbed, or didn't feel like 2022 where you had CJ Stroud coming back and you had a whole bunch of talent and you felt like, gosh, this is the year that things are going to click. It was a disappointing loss to Michigan, but won the Rose Bowl in epic fashion. All these receivers coming back. It's going to be a great season. There's a lot of excitement and anticipation around this year's team, but I think as a staff, you look at it and say, hey, hold on a second. New starting quarterback, 3 new offensive linemen. Like, let's just pump the brakes here and remember that there is a process we have to go about. And, despite all of the outside noise that they claim, hey, we don't listen to any of that. I appreciate that, but come on, everybody hears stuff, and you got to have a filter that's realistic to know what to push aside and say that doesn't matter, and what stuff actually will get to you and resonate. And I give them credit for, I'm assuming they're being honest in the way they're answering these questions there. I give them credit for being process oriented.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that was by far and away one of his more detailed answers, to a question. And I love that, you can see exactly what you said. What's important to Ryan Day? When it's a Ryan Day coach program, and that's got to be the case, the situational success is the case kind of throughout the country. But, hey, we want our guys to perform on their individual jobs correctly and do it to the best of their abilities. And then we have to win when, our backs are against the wall. And that's what a Ryan Day coach team is going to do. And that's what he's trying to build with these guys because, as we've said before, being able to do this, to be successful on 3rd and short against Western Kentucky isn't going to beat you, Michigan, this week, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. And the same thing on the flip side, losing 3rd and medium to Youngstown State is something you got to correct right now. It can't be any longer where, you're playing an inferior opponent and you're 3rd and 6 and we're punting after that. Like we got to execute now because, later on in the season, that stuff like that, those little mistakes will come back to bite you. So you have one more great opportunity to really hone that in, really sharpen that tool, and then, it's kind of go time, after that.
I thought Day was asked a couple of other really, really good questions. One by Doug LeMaurice on trying to walk the line between efficiency and explosiveness on offense. And is it always perfectly down the middle, or are there games or times where you're like, nah, I need to favor one versus the other? I thought that was really good, the way Day answered that. And I also thought Ryan's comment about when he was asked literally, okay, you talk about all the time how to build this consistency. How do you do that? Like, what are you guys doing to figure that out? And he talked about not just the physical stuff, but the mental stuff, the preparation, well before you even get to a practice field, let alone a game field. I thought that was a fairly insightful answer as well. So go back and check out Ryan's press conference from yesterday. And I'll share one more thing with you because it was a question that I had asked last week about, there were some moments in week 1 where I didn't think the wide receivers had been involved enough blocking in the run game. There were times in the second half where I thought Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka looked maybe a little bit disinterested. And I thought there was at least one, if not multiple scenarios this past weekend where things looked substantially better, and asked Day whether or not those are the kinds of things that they are showing the team in film sessions, even if it's just to fire guys up, to tell your offensive lineman, hey, Marvin Harrison's out there blocking somebody, Julian Fleming's out there blocking somebody. And here's what Ryan had to say about that. I asked you last week about receivers in the blocking game, and there was one in particular that sprung them back over a touchdown where 2 receivers blocked 3 guys to the ground. Are those the kinds of things that you guys show in film sessions that hopefully inspire the rest of the team? You see receivers doing stuff like that?
Yeah, and we show the good ones and we show the ones that we need to improve on. And it's part of our meeting on Sunday, and that was one of the ones that we're on. That was a huge play. They did a great job. Also, the one on Trayvion's touchdown, Emeka, and Marvin did a really nice job, 3 for 3 on the perimeter. You make those blocks, that's when good turns to great, and that was a huge emphasis going into last week. We thought that we needed to block the perimeter better. We did that. Got to keep improving. Bigger challenges are coming ahead, but there was definitely some tangible things we saw that we showed the guys where if we make those blocks on the perimeter, we get the ball out there. That's a gain of 2 touchdowns. That if you don't make those blocks, they're gains of 5 and 6. So everyone has to do their part on offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's so good and it's so true. When you're in a team meeting room on Sunday morning, everyone kind of rolls in. The offensive line is all they're all taped up and they got ice all over them. Everyone's kind of licking their wounds, potentially being a little sore. And the receivers are the ones hooping and hollering hey, I had touchdown this, 80 yards here. Look at this sweet catch. But when you stop and they put the team in the team meeting room and the defense is in there and the offense is in there and there's a 10 clip set that they put up on the board and Marvin Harrison's laying somebody out to spring Emeka Egbuka or to spring Julian Fleming or, Julian Fleming hustling to go get an extra block so Travion can score. That totally resonates with the entire team. That's when the offensive line is like, whoa, that Marvin Harrison guy, he's more than acrobatic catches and touchdowns. Like, he'll stick his nose in there. We got to do our part. We have to pick up our game because how can I slack on the inside when that dude's on the outside giving it his all every single play? And on the flip side, too, it's equally evident when it's a backflip and Marvin's, walked off the line of scrimmage and doesn't block anybody, and his corner makes a tackle 30 yards down the field and it prevents a touchdown. Like, that has an equal effect. So it's like that's a real thing in a Sunday meeting where it's like, hey, they'll show everything. They'll show good, they'll show bad, and they'll show the entire team. So you're not only accountable to the guys in your room, you're accountable to the guys on the defensive side, you're accountable to the kicker, you're accountable to everybody. And they put that on the board, and that's so big. And it's so cool to hear him say that and especially two clips that you and I have talked about, like, hey, they're showing everybody that. And he said exactly that. It was pretty cool.
We've talked a lot about the offense here in the first 20 minutes of the show. And I know there's been a lot of commentary around Ohio State fandom around the defense. Much of it praiseworthy because there have been some really good moments so far, but fairly some concerns. Is the defensive line playing up to their standard? I thought the coaching staff, I don't know that I would think they took the easy way out, but they were quick to say, well, how much pass rush are you going to generate against a triple option in week 1? And how much pass rush are you going to generate against a Youngstown State team that, the ball was in and out of their hand in 2 seconds in week 2 most of the time? I just felt like there were more stalemates at the line of scrimmage where, even on the interior, where, like, I think Ohio State has had decent play from their defensive tackles. It's not like they're regressing and they're getting pushed around. They're just not collapsing the pocket quite the way I expected, given everything we'd heard and seen, leading up to this point through camp and what we know about in spring ball. So I want to see a big week from those guys. And Jim Knowles talked today in a pretty open, I should say, talked yesterday in a pretty open manner about his need to make some adjustments from a schematic and general approach perspective, because he's not coaching at Duke or Oklahoma State anymore. He's coaching Ohio State with guys that, with all due respect to the previous stops that Coach Knowles has had along the way, he's coaching a different caliber and different depth of roster than he's had previously. So he was asked today, hey, there were instances where you blitzed a lot. There were instances where you didn't. Did you blitz more than you wanted to, or did you not blitz as much as you thought you would? And some of the questions I think he danced around a little bit, but this one was really interesting when he started to touch on his willingness to adjust his coaching philosophy given the kind of talent he's working with. Here's Coach Knowles.
I guess just maybe as part of your philosophy, how important are havoc plays behind the line of scrimmage, top up the loss and sacks, and when you come out of a game where you're playing an FCS opponent, you only get 3 tackles for loss, and team runs the ball a lot. Is that not meeting the standard, or do you not concern yourself with those kind of plays?
I think I've adjusted. I think when you're at places where you need to live in that world, feast or famine type of world where you're trying to make sure that you take a lot of chances, do a lot of different things to somehow gain the advantage. I think I've adjusted my philosophy here because we have different players, and my job is to make sure that we win the game, not get the TFLs. And a lot of times I think the best philosophy here is to let the guys play, keep the points off the board.
That adjustment from Oklahoma State,
absolutely,
to here. When did that kind of flip for you, I guess?
Probably last year when we experienced some issues. Yeah. It was, I think if you live in that world against teams that, where you have a skill advantage, it can look really nice. But when you get into the matchup games, I found that it can hurt you. So you need to be able to adjust.
Knowles was asked a lot about his time in the Big 12 and whether or not this Western Kentucky team looked like Big 12 offenses, and how, frankly, he was asked point blank, was your success over the last couple of years you were at Oklahoma State and had a top 5 defense nationally, was that success a direct byproduct of the aggressive nature of your play calling? And he said, unquestionably, yes. So again, I give Coach Knowles some credit here for being able to pull back for a guy that wants to get after you, for him to say, no, maybe we're not going to bring 5 or 6 and have some weaknesses elsewhere in the defense. He said point blank, Anthony, my job's not to get tackles for loss, it's to win games. And later in the press conference, he said, sometimes that means you got to get the damn ball back, because there were times defense couldn't get off the field, even though they ultimately didn't give up points. Said that it's not good enough to just get a check. You need a check plus. But there's an element of, hey, maybe if I get a little more conservative with my play calling and trust that these guys can go create some havoc and go play, that maybe that would be a better way to avoid giving up some big plays. I'm interested to see how that works against some teams that really want to chuck it.
Yeah, and I think 2 things come to mind when I listen to that clip. The first is the team's going to hear that and really appreciate his humility towards the situation, and really appreciate his ability to adjust. Like, hey, hand up, this is mine. I needed to make this change. And that's your coach standing in front of the media and saying it with the microphones right in front of his face and saying, hey, I needed to adjust and I needed to get better. And you appreciate that as a player, being like, hey, coach didn't throw any of us under the bus. He said he needed to adjust and get better. So that's the first thing that I take away. And the second thing is, from his perspective, think back to his days, like you said, at Duke or Oklahoma State, where, hey, on Monday or on Sunday when they're watching the tape of their upcoming opponent, they're like, all right, this team's better at their outside receivers are better than our corners, or their tight ends are better than our safeties. So we have to protect our guys. We have to protect our corners or our safeties. And you do that by having to do crazy blitzes and having to get those TFLs and having to have strip sacks and big plays. And that when you don't get those, that's when the big plays start to happen. Well, now Ohio State, everywhere you look, pretty much regardless of the week, you have the advantage. So now you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to draw up exotic stuff. You can just let your guys play. And if you do want to get aggressive, guess what? Denzel Burke's going to knock the ball away if you don't get home. Or, Sonny Styles is going to make a play, a freak play that saves a touchdown if the blitz doesn't work. So that allows him as a play caller to be like, all right, hey, we can be aggressive if we want, but we can also pull off the reins and it's not going to kill us. And that's something, like he said to adjust from his stops at different places, because he's dealing with a whole different unit and a bunch of really, really skilled players.
It's my opinion that that's a trust that gets developed over time, right? It's Denzel Burke saying at the beginning of the year, the reason why he's looked so good and felt so comfortable is because he knows exactly what the system is and what he is required to do. And he can go play with this relentless, passionate aggression because he knows where he's supposed to be and he can go make plays. He's not guessing. And there were definitely some bad moments for him last year. But I would imagine that, when Jim Knowles sees Jordan Hancock, Sonny Styles, Lathan Ransom, Tommy Eichenberg, Steel Chambers going and making the plays that they are, and certainly involving in the pass rush too. Mike Hall is a dude. You can feel Mike Hall, and Ryan Day even alluded to that yesterday. When Mike Hall's in there, he plays with an attitude, and frankly, I'd like to see more guys play like that. So it's a trust that the players build up with the coaching staff, where maybe it's a little easier for Jim to say, okay, I've seen this enough times to know that I don't need to call some crazy exotic blitz scheme here, because I think our guys can go get it done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then it goes back to, what really prompted the question, like, is the defensive line not playing up to expectation? Sure. Yeah, we expected them. We expected JT and Jack Sawyer to be these dominant forces, and it just hasn't happened yet. And it's all pretty much been the opposing team's scheme to this point. you're going to start seeing a little bit different approach to Ohio State here in this week especially, and then next week coming down the pipe, where it's going to look more like the football we're used to seeing, where a quarterback's going to be dropping back. They're going to be going through reads. There's going to be time for JT to get home. And especially this week, like they're going to throw it, 66% of the time. They're pretty much 2-1 throwing the ball. And there's going to be a lot of quick stuff. Don't get me wrong. They'll throw a lot of bubble screens and things like that. They're also going to drop back, and it's going to allow them to it's going to allow the defensive line to actually become a part of the game, which they haven't been able to do for these past couple of weeks. So I think the defense you'll see on Saturday is going to look a lot different than what you've seen these past couple of weeks.
And they're going to be tested in different ways for sure. So I'm looking forward to that response. I hope Josh Proctor is healthy and available to play this weekend, but I'd be more concerned about him getting ready for Notre Dame. Malik Hartford, started the game and did not play for very long before Jihad Carter got in there. And Jim Knowles said, Malik just looked a little bit uncomfortable, and they preferred to go with somebody who had a little more experience. Jihad Carter, it's not like he's got more experience at Ohio State, but he's been a college athlete a little bit longer. And I thought Jihad played well. I remember one tackle in particular that I thought was really good. So let's go see these guys get tested this weekend. And I certainly got the sense today or yesterday that the coaching staff is in a position here where they are laser focused on right now, on this week. There is no looking ahead to Notre Dame, as we had kind of talked about in yesterday's podcast. Ryan basically snuffed any of that out and said, this isn't a trap game for us. This isn't a last exhibition before you play a big game. They recognize that Western Kentucky is going to go out and probably just start swinging. They ran 90 plays against Auburn when they played Auburn last year, and they're probably not going to try to slow the game down the way that the last couple opponents did. So there's a lot of focus right now on, hey, we got to get better, and we got a chance to do that. So let's do that now, and then we'll worry about next week.
It was so good, too, because it was pretty early on in the presser where I don't know who asked it, but it was a great question. Like, hey, this is a good trap situation. How are you preventing against it? And Coach did. He nipped that thing right in the butt. He goes, this isn't a trap situation for us. We're worried about Western Kentucky now. And it was such a good answer, because my concern on yesterday's pod was when you think of a trap game, this is a trap game. But it's great to hear them, really being focused on getting better. And then it's like, Brendan, it's all connected, man. It's like, hey, when you're focused on winning the situations on Saturday and you're focused on grading out as a champion, Notre Dame doesn't even come into your head. Like, it's 3rd and 6. You're not thinking about Sam Hartman. You're thinking about, hey, we're getting off the field right now because tomorrow in film, I don't want to see myself getting beat, So it's all connected, and it's such good. I thought today was just, I don't know, you can kind of hear it, yesterday was just like such a good messaging from the coaching staff about where the state of the program's at right now.
And look, I mean, to me, it's not even so much about you're playing in a game looking forward to the next team. It's about, did you do enough work this week that you were focused on what your responsibility is in a few days? Or were you dogging it all week because it wasn't important to you because you just expect to beat somebody? Like, to me, that's where the, we got caught looking ahead actually plays out. It's not so much in the game where somebody lines up at, I don't know, tailback, you take a handoff, you're like, I'm not going to run hard because my 80% should be better than Western Kentucky's 100%. Like, I don't buy that.
No, I think you're dead right. Totally right. It's a lot of the preparation stuff and making sure you're getting better. And think about it, when you're stacking good preparation days, that's like, think about like building a house. It's like brick by brick, right? If you put a couple of those bricks in, halfway, the house is going to come down. So it's really important to really stack those days and really put good work in throughout the week, put good work in on Saturday, and just take care of business. I just loved what I heard today or yesterday from the guys. Like, I think the program's in a really good spot, going into this week. It's an important game. Don't come out of this game feeling bad before next week. You can't have that.
Brick by brick. That's what I like to think about Buckeyes now. We're building something cool. We're glad to have you a part of it. Fired up that you're with us on Buckeye Breakdown every morning at 7 a.m. Can't wait to see you again on Thursday. In the meantime, We'll have a chance to talk with some players later tonight at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center after practice. Probably won't find out who those players are until later in the day, so I'd love to be able to tell you who it is. Usually we don't get the same batch of players from one week to the next, so if you're interested in finding out who it probably isn't, I would look back at last week and maybe think we're going to see some different guys, but exactly who it is, I'm not quite sure yet. Hopefully we get a chance to talk to Kyle now that we know for sure that he's the team's starting quarterback. So we'll have all the latest for you over on buckeyesnow.com. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'd really appreciate that. We've had great growth here in the last couple of weeks and have certainly enjoyed meeting some new folks along the way who've been pretty active in our comment section. So keep that up. If you're listening after the fact, thanks for doing that too, but know that you can join us live over on our channel. For Anthony Meglin, I'm Brendan Gulick. Have a great day. We'll see you at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center later tonight. We get a chance to talk to players after practice.